alone in the room with that large man, had given him the yes the questions appeared to prompt. Would the staff have prevented me from taking my son home? And a child who was entertaining dark thoughts, was this really the best way to help him? Separate him from his parents and present him with a series of escalating questions about killing himself? I hadn't signed my son up for therapy. I hadn't taken him for a neuropsychological evaluation. I had taken him to the pediatrician for a stomach ache. There was no indication, no reason even to suspect, that my son had any mental illness, and the nurse didn't wait for one. He knew he didn't have to. We parents have become so frantic, hypervigilant, and borderline obsessive about our kids' mental health that we routinely allow all manner of mental health expert to evict us from the room. We will let you know. We've been relying on them for decades to tell us how to raise well-adjusted kids. Maybe we were overcompensating for the fact that our own parents had assumed the opposite, that psychologists were the last people you should consult on how to raise normal kids. When we were little, my brother and I were spanked. Our feelings were seldom consulted when consequential decisions about our lives were made. Where we would attend school, whether we would show up at synagogue for major holidays, what sort of clothes fit the place and occasion. If we didn't particularly relish the food set out for dinner, no alternate menu was forthcoming. If we lacked some critical right of self-expression, some essential exploration of a repressed identity, it never occurred to either of us. It would be years before anyone in my generation would regard these perfectly average markers of an 80s childhood as vectors of emotional injury. But as millions of women and men my age entered adulthood, we commenced therapy. We explored our childhoods and learned to see our parents as emotionally stunted. Emotionally stunted parents expected too much, listened too little, and failed to discover their kids' hidden pain. Emotionally stunted parents inflicted emotional injury. We never doubted that we wanted kids of our own. We vowed that our child rearing would reflect a greater psychological awareness. We resolved to listen better, inquire more, monitor our kids' moods, accommodate their opinions when making a family decision, and, whenever possible, anticipate our kids' distress. We would cherish our relationship with our kids, tear down the barrier of authority past generations had erected between parent and child, and instead see our children as teammates, mentees, buddies. More than anything, we wanted to raise happy kids. We looked to the wellness experts for help. We devoured their best-selling parenting books, which established the methods by which we would educate, correct, and even speak to our own children. Guided by these experts, we adopted a therapeutic approach to parenting. We learned to offer our kids the reasons behind every rule and request. We never, ever spanked. We perfected the timeout and provided thorough explanation for any punishment, which we then rebranded as a consequence to remove any associated shame and make us feel less authoritarian. Successful parenting became a function with a single coefficient: our kids' happiness at any given instant. An ideal childhood meant no pain, no discomfort, no fights, no failure, and absolutely no hint of trauma. But the more closely we tracked our kids' feelings, the more difficult it became for us to ride out their momentary displeasure. The more closely we examined our kids, the more glaring their deviations from an endless array of benchmarks: academic, speech, social, and emotional. Each now felt like catastrophe. We rushed our kids back to the mental health professionals who had guided our parenting, this time for testing, diagnosis, counseling, and medication. We needed our kids and everyone around them to know our kids weren't shy. They had social anxiety disorder or social phobia. They weren't poorly behaved. They had oppositional defiant disorder. They weren't disruptive students. They had ADHD. It wasn't our fault and it wasn't theirs. We would attack and finally eliminate the